So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first of NUI Galway's virtual information evenings for 2021. My name is Gavin Collins. I'm the Vice Dean for Student Recruitment at the NUI Galway College of Science and Engineering. So the theme of tonight's virtual information evening is science and engineering, and we'll try to present to you some of the information that we think you'll find useful about our science courses and our engineering degrees over the next 2 hours. So the way we'll structure this evening is in hour one, 7 till 8 p.m., we'll talk mostly about science and the 32 different ways we have for you to become a scientist. And I'm joined by some guests on my panel this evening, and those include Professor Jacqueline Keane, who's from the University of Hawaii. So she's from the university's Institute for Astronomy. I'm also joined by my colleague here at NUI Galway, Liz Coleman. And Dr. Coleman is the leading academic on our new climate physics stream, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later on. And we've also got a current student who happens to be a recent graduate of microbiology who'll join us as well during this first hour. And then in the second hour, I'll be joined by another of my colleagues, Dr. Colm O'Riordan. And Colm is the director of our BSc in Computer Science and Information Technology. And we have a current student, Joyanne, who's in the final year of that degree, and she'll join us as well. So more about engineering and computer science in the second hour from 8 to 9. But for this hour, then, as I say, we'll focus firstly on science at NUI Galway. So the plan is that I'll give you a brief overview for the next, say, almost 20 minutes, just to fill you in on the range of courses we offer in science at NUI Galway. And then we'll hear a little from Liz on climate physics, and we'll go straight into our panel discussion, and we'll welcome our audience to send questions to us by chat. One other thing I'll mention is that throughout the evening, we're also joined by Oisin Cusack, who's from sport at NUI Galway, and Oisin will be happy to answer questions you might have on sports at the university. We're also joined, I think, by Kathleen Hartigan, and Kathleen is representing the NUI Galway Access Office. So she'll be able to answer questions about alternative routes to university, and also access to underrepresented prospective students, people from socioeconomically difficult situations, including also people with disabilities, and Kathleen will be able to tell you about the services available through the Access Office. So if you have some questions for Kathleen, you can also ask those on the chat. And finally then, if you have some general questions about admissions to the university, please also type those in, because we have some other colleagues from the university who are also ready and happy to answer some of those. Okay, so I will then shift to full screen to show you my slides. And as I say, I'll have about 20 past, so about 25 past, I think we'll move on and hear from Liz and move to our panel discussion. So this is an overview on science at NUI Galway, and really on the 32 ways you might become a scientist with us. And this refers to, well, the breadth of choice available to you across the sciences at the university, and the range of different subject areas and pathways that are open to you. I'm conscious we have some fifth years, sixth year students joining us this evening, and you may have already browsed through cao.ie and seen the options available at NUI Galway. And you'll see that there are 13 different BSc degrees listed on CAO. However, I'm here to tell you that your choice is actually a good deal wider than that. And I'll explain how there are indeed 32 different ways to study science with us. So I'll tell you a little bit about the university, why you might think about studying science, why science at NUI Galway, because you obviously have lots of different options, and then how to study science with us. And briefly, I'll focus on our newest degree course, Agricultural Science, and I'll finish off by giving you some tips on how you might find out some more information. So a little bit about the university first. Well, we're consistently ranked amongst the top universities in the world, in the top 1 or 2%, according to, for example, here you can see the QS World University Rankings. So these are systems that rank the thousands of universities worldwide, and NUI Galway consistently sits in the top 1 or 2%. We also take sustainability really seriously, and I'm sure this will be of interest to many of our prospective science and indeed engineering students, especially now that we're bang in the middle of COP26 and lots of people are talking about sustainability and climate action. So almost everything we do in the university now is actually influenced by our contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, so the UN's SDGs. And in fact, some of those ranking systems specifically rank universities on this basis. And NUI Galway does really well in this respect, particularly on the areas where we're really strong on research. So say in energy and marine and environment, and in data, and in many areas of healthcare as well. So you're here tonight, perhaps because you're thinking maybe you want to be a scientist. So I would say it's good to think about who scientists are and where they work and what they do. And really, I would say scientists are required everywhere, and careers in science are as varied as they are many. So it could take me all night and into tomorrow to list all the different possible careers a scientist might embark upon. Because really, I would say what makes all of those people you see there, you know, the science communicator, the person working in energy and agriculture and meteorology, the astronomy graduate, the marine biologist, the ecologists, the forensic scientists, what makes all of those people a scientist is their core skills. And I've listed what I think are the core skills of a scientist and what you would train in were you to study science at university. So the first is in understanding big, you know, sometimes existential challenges and questions. Things like, say, climate action, or indeed COVID-19 and maybe the next pandemics that we might encounter. So understanding those and asking the right questions in an informed way, really, frankly, I guess, in only the way a scientist could. And secondly, then, in trying to answer those questions, you'll need to apply analytical tools and generate information and data. And you'll train in understanding which will be the appropriate tools to use at every given turn to answer those questions. The third is analyzing those data and making sense of them. The fourth is drawing conclusions from the data and from your analysis to support decisions. And often scientists find themselves in a privileged position in society then where they can influence decisions, say, by policymakers and politicians and the rest of society. And you need look no further, I guess, than the critical role that scientists have played during the pandemic and in helping to formulate our response to COVID-19. And lastly, then, the fifth core skill that I would identify is effective communication. And scientists need to be able to communicate with each other about their science, but equally, they really do need to be able to communicate effectively with non-scientists. And I would say that is increasingly the case as science takes a more central role in our lives. And that's something we place a lot of emphasis on as you study science here at the university. So why study science then and earn a Bachelor of Science degree or a BSc? Well, it's frankly to get those core skills. And our graduates then have employment prospects in lots of different industries in the pharmaceutical, biopharma, chemical, petroleum, new energy, renewables sectors, in medical devices and med tech, in electronics, computers, financial services, IT, and really that's just a set of examples. They're also in education at all levels, in research, in public service, in the health service, in local authorities, in the EPA, and so on. And within 6 months of having graduated, 98% of our graduates find relevant employment or relevant further study. So there really are excellent employment prospects. So why then might NUI Galway be a good choice for your BSc degree? Because really, I would say all excellent universities, up there in the top 1 or 2%, as I mentioned, will deliver on those key core skills in science. However, we think we do it exceptionally well, and we think the emphasis we place on the different aspects of your training means that you'll be in safe hands with us. So I've boiled it down to these 5 reasons why NUI Galway is a good choice for your BSc degree. The first is around some of our unique specialisms. So marine science, for example, is the only such degree in the country. You'll hear in a moment from my colleague Liz, who can tell you about climate physics, which we're really excited about. The second is around careers, and I mentioned the excellent employment prospects. And in the chart here, you can see that this is from the College of Science and Engineering, and it's data from the Higher Education Authority that are undergrads. You can see in this orange column here that 54.8% of them within 6 months of having graduated are working full-time. Another 35% or so are in full-time further study, and only 2% are looking for work. The third is around our most influential scientists. So some of my colleagues are amongst the most highly cited in the world, meaning that their work has been read and noticed by many other scientists, and that they're making a big dent in their field. So you get a chance to sit in front of those people in your lectures, and their passion for their topic and their subject can bleed across into your learning. And I think that's something we put a lot of importance on. The fourth is around placement and fieldwork and study abroad. And many of our programs, and I'll tell you about this a little later as well, for engineering, but it's also the case for several of our science degrees, that we have a formal placement with an employer as part of your degree schedule. For fieldwork, think about where we are. We're bang in the middle of having the Atlantic Ocean on one side and access to the Marine Institute and the national research vessels. We have Connemara above us, the Burren beneath us, and the River Shannon on the other side. So we literally are in a unique place on the planet. And for people working with environmental science and ecology, and even say the fieldwork aspects of physics, which you might find surprising, they will find themselves essentially with access to all of those outdoor laboratories. The next part of that point is study abroad, and all of our students will have the chance to study abroad for a whole semester, a whole term, if their grades are good enough and if they can impress us sufficiently well in an interview we'd have with you. So we'll have that interview in second year, and you could perhaps study abroad then for a time in third year, and we'll map your results from your time abroad back onto your marks and results in Galway. And lastly, then, our teaching infrastructure. So all of our students will typically, as part of their science degree, undertake a research project in their final year. And they'll do that in our research labs with our professors and postdocs and PhD students. So we don't hide away our best resources and equipment from you. Instead, we bring you in and we host you as part of your learning. So you get to see our best equipped labs. Okay, so there are indeed 32 different ways to become a scientist at NUI Galway. And really what this means is that you can earn one of 32 different BSc degrees with us. So let me try to break that down and explain what's on offer. So this is a relatively busy slide. This refers to the 20 different pathways on our flagship BSc degree, and that's GY 301 on the CAO. And you'll see that there's a bunch of different yellow pathways related to maths and data science and computer science. The blue ones here in physics and climate physics, medicinal chemistry and chemistry, earth and ocean sciences, and over on the pink line here then, anatomy, pharmacology and physiology, orange line, plant and agri-biosciences and biochemistry, and lastly then zoology, microbiology, and botany and plant science. So you will be able then on that degree to take 4 subjects, typically say biology, physics, chemistry, and maths, for example, to get a foundation in the sciences in year 1. But then in year 2, take 3 pathways from those 20. So then in year 3, you'll drop one of those, keeping 2 pathways. And then in year 3, you'll have kept just one of those the whole way through to year 4, and that will be your specialist degree. Now, many people refer to this as general science. I can assure you it really isn't. I think general science would be a bad idea. You'd probably be really good at pub quizzes, but you mightn't be a really attractive graduate for employers. So we never have, we don't, and we don't intend to offer a degree in general science. In fact, GY 301, as you can see, is a specialist degree in science because you will specialize in one of those 20 pathways. So it'll be one of those 20, but now I've made the slide busier and I've added 12 other BSc degrees. So let me just take away those 20 pathways to make it easier to see those 12 other degrees. So there's 2 in maths, as you can see there. There's physics with options. There's biopharmaceutical chemistry, marine science, environmental science, earth and ocean science, environmental health and safety, biomedical science, and then biotechnology, and our 2 new degrees, agricultural science and genetics and genomics. So those you can apply for directly through CAO. So some important messages then to try to start to wrap things up. Firstly, each of our BSc courses, either GY 301 or one of the other 12 I've just put on the screen, they result in the same outcome, a Bachelor of Science degree. So whether you've earned a BSc in one of our pathways, say microbiology or medicinal chemistry or mathematics, or from one of our standalone degrees you can apply directly to, like biotechnology, everything will be of the same depth and value and specialization. So every graduate leaves with the same core skills in science, but it then depends on which area you were most interested in and that you specialized in. So GY 301 isn't general science, and GY 301 graduates are specialists. And CAO points, whilst they vary from year to year and between our courses, they don't indicate quality or employment prospects. They literally just are an indicator of supply and demand, the number of places we have and the number of applicants we've received. So we've 2 ways then, our BSc degree, GY 301, with 19 different pathways, plus our 20th one, which Liz will talk about, and then the 12 other standalone degrees. The pros and cons, well, GY 301, there's a huge choice of pathway options that you can decide to take, but there are ceilings on the numbers of students that we can take into some pathways. And then the standalone degrees, well, the big pro is that there's certainty from day one, from the get-go, as to where you're going and what you're going to specialize in. However, there is a little less choice along the way. Briefly, let me just put a couple of slides up on agricultural science before I finish, because it's our newest degree, which we launched last year. So our first group of first years are with us this semester. So this is a unique program, GY 322. It's jointly taught by ourselves in science and engineering and our colleagues in arts and social sciences. So it combines science with agricultural practice, rural development, and social science. And the idea is that we train the future leaders in the agricultural sector, which undoubtedly is a really important sector into the future in Ireland. So the sustainability of that sector and how it copes with climate action, but also how it considers the sociological aspects of employment and rural development and so on, will be a big focus. So it'll take in all of those aspects: sustainability, agri-innovations, people, animal, crops, bioeconomy, the technology, and the sociology of this area. It's taught in the West, by which we mean in the west of Ireland, but also in, well, the global West or the global North. But it's got a global focus, including on international development. And some of the people leading this course, particularly my colleague, Professor Charlie Spillane, who's the course director, has some really active links with other universities around the world, particularly in developing countries. So there's also going to be a focus on that. So it'll take in the SDGs as a kind of a guiding principle the whole way through this degree. So that's something I would recommend anyone with any curiosity about what I've just said there might look up. So lastly, on finding out some more then, well, you can do lots of different things. You can see our prospectus, and we can even post it directly to you. We can send you a hard copy. Sometimes it's easier to use the hard copy than looking at everything online. You can see our CAO hub at nuigalway.ie/CAO. See our course web pages. So each one of our courses has its own web page. Compare courses, compare which are the modules you do from year to year, because that's, in my view, the only way that you'll easily be able to reckon whether you'd be happy in a course. See which modules and subjects you take from year to year. Because if you're not going to enjoy a course, then you're very unlikely to do well or maybe even stick with it. Ask a question online. So you can ask a question online on one of the course web pages, and then maybe attend an event like Open Day or Taster Day, or congratulations, I see there's 150 of you here tonight at our information evening. So that's a good first step. Here are some shortcuts to each of those course web pages. So you can go nuigalway.ie/GY301 for that degree and use just the CAO course code to get a shortcut to any one of those. We will have a PDF of these slides available to you as well on our College of Science and Engineering webpage. So you'll be able to go to the PDF and click directly on those links as well. So we'll try to make it easy for you to get where you need to go. Lastly, then, we have brochures for each one of those. So in the PDF that we'll put on our webpage, you'll be able to click directly on those, and you'll see even more detail about the subjects from year to year on each one of those courses. There's several YouTube videos you can watch as well, so you can spend hours watching interesting stuff about science at the university. Lastly, there's some information about equality, diversity and inclusion, and the Access Office. And as I said, Kathleen from the Access Office is online to answer some questions you might have, but you'll be able to download from our PDF the Access Office guide and here and there guides and so on. And there are scholarships, and you'll get links on our website around scholarship information as well. Okay, so to finish then, I don't know what will be the hot jobs in 2025 or 2026 or beyond, but what I do know is that the core skills in science will be your calling card. So it's a pretty safe bet that scientists will be in demand increasingly in the future, and those core skills will stand you well. So I would say come join us, and we'll be really happy to see you at other events and perhaps to welcome you next September to us. So I am going to stop sharing, and I think next I'm going to go to Liz Coleman. So Liz, I think I might even get you to share your screen, and you'll be able to share your slides and talk for a couple of minutes to our audience about climate physics. Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem at all. Hi everyone, thanks for coming along tonight. I'll just share my screen. So I have three slides, and I'll just share them really quickly, but I'm very happy to answer any questions. Let me know when you can see this. Is that up on screen?
Yes, I will, Liz. It's on the way, I think, Liz. Yeah, it's just taking a moment. Yes, it's there now. So off you go.
Okay, so I work in, or I've been researching in the Centre for Climate and Air Pollution Studies, which is within the School of Physics in NUIG, and we've been making measurements of the atmosphere for decades and decades, since the 50s. And so when we measure, what we're measuring is how the atmosphere has been changing, and through the studies that we do, we're able to tell how this affects our climate and how this affects our health and how this affects our environment. And in the Centre for Climate Change and Climate and Air Pollution Studies, we've produced some very high impact work that is directly fed into the IPCC report that informs the COP26 process that you, I'm sure, are hearing a lot about at the moment. So we're very excited to to bring all this research into our degree programs in the physics and climate physics degree. Because physics is a degree that equips graduates with breakthrough potential for innovation and problem solving. It's a really, through a physics degree, you gain the skills that make you highly employable across a range of fields. But through the physics and climate physics pathway, this will now allow graduates to apply these skills that you get from a physics degree to meet the grand challenges facing our Earth and climate system that we're so aware of in this current time. Try and move on. So in the Centre for Climate and Air Pollution Studies, and through this physics and climate physics degree, you'd have access to next generation state-of-the-art technology, from modeling systems to instrumentation to understanding the processes that are causing climate change and air pollution, and through to satellite technology. And this is a great offering for students because it offers students knowledge and context and experience for environmental solutions, so that one could work in the field of meteorology, in policy to influence how society might change to solve the climate crisis, environmental protection, public awareness, or forecasting or emergency response. So to be able to develop technology and services whereby people could respond to any kind of environmental threats that occur. But of course, through doing this degree, you also get in-depth physics training that will give you the skills for a degree applying your physics to technology, or even data, finance, education, engineering, all the career options that are available to physicists. So if anyone has any questions about the degree, I'd very happy to answer them. But otherwise, I think that's all I'm going to say.
Great, thanks so much, Liz. So I might come back to you again in a moment on climate physics, because I think we may well have some questions, and I know I have some questions for you anyway, okay? But maybe I'll start our discussion now with Jacqueline. Do I see you there, Jacqueline?
Yes, I'm online.
I do. So for everybody's benefit, and I'll just ask Keane to put his camera on as well, let me reintroduce my panel then for the discussion. And we'll welcome you to keep asking questions in the chat, and our other colleagues might be able to answer some of them. So even if you've questions, say, on scholarships or admissions, our colleagues from the recruitment team should be able to answer, I think, some of those. And I'll keep an eye on the chat as well. So if there's something relevant to our discussion, I'll be able to bring it in, and I'm sure Liz might be able to help me as well to answer some of those. So to reintroduce my panel then, Jacqueline Keane is professor at the University of Hawaii's Institute for Astronomy, and she has kindly joined us this evening. And Jacqueline is a physics graduate of NUI Galway, I'm pretty sure. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yes. Yes. Yeah, you can hear me? Yes, I am.
Yeah. Yes, I can. And Liz Coleman, from whom we've just heard, and Liz is the director of that climate physics stream. And then Cian Lawless, who is a recent microbiology graduate and is now a freshman PhD student with us at the university. So maybe to start with you first, Jacqueline, could you tell our audience, bearing in mind we have an audience of perhaps senior cycle leaving cert students, but also perhaps some guidance counselors and parents joining as well. Could you tell us maybe just how you got into science and physics in the first instance?
Yes.
What drew you to it?
Yeah, for me, it really is quite simple. I love looking at the night sky. I love looking at the stars. And from a young age, I actually saved and got my own telescope. And I was fascinated by the space race, by, you know, the space station and all the launches. And I recall writing to the US Air Force to understand how I could be a pilot for them. And they kindly wrote back and says, well, you should get a degree in science. And so all through my secondary school, that was in my mind. So one thing I would like to say to anybody who's online here is I did not get my first choice in the CAO. And it's not a disaster. I have now got my PhD a number of years ago. I've worked at NASA and now I'm living in Hawaii. So just what is important is to pick a subject or a selection of subjects that is definitely going to interest you and keep you in university. So I did not decide to repeat my Leaving Cert. I took my second choice, which was actually, I think, in GMIT, as it's called now. And I transferred from GMIT to NUIG. And I got my honors in applied physics and electronic engineering from NUIG. And then I did my master's. So there are many avenues. Don't give up. And also, if you're worried about your mathematics, please just pass your mathematics in the Leaving Cert. After that, you learn how to apply it through all of the sciences. You don't have to solve every problem. You just will be taught how to apply it when you get to university. But do get your maths in the Leaving Cert. And if that means dropping to pass maths, don't be afraid to do that. Just make sure you get your maths.
Sure, I think that's really sound advice. And in my experience, often I speak with prospective students who attempt to map out their careers, you know, maybe 6 or 10 years ahead, and perhaps have very specific ideas as to what they want to do. But I hope that the story of my slides and also what you've started to tell us there, Jacqueline, is that, you know, it doesn't matter if things don't work out according to plan A, or if you don't have complete clarity on exactly what you want to do. And it's often okay to think that, well, I'm going to take this first step and then see where that lands me, and take it one step at a time, right?
Yes, definitely. And then keep in mind, it's nice to have in the first, second, and third year, especially the second and third year, an option to specialize and experience other fields in sciences. And for me, I was torn between chemistry and physics, and I'm very happy with the choice I made going down applied physics, because I learned a great depth of fundamental in physics, but also electronic engineering. And these are all things I use every day in astronomy and astrophysics. I specialize in astronomy in my master's and my PhD.
Mm-hmm. And could you tell us then maybe about your job in Hawaii and your links with NASA?
Yeah, so my main role right now is as a research scientist. And what I do is I use all the telescopes around the world, but principally on Mauna Kea, which is one of our islands in Hawaii. It's at 4,000 meters, and we have a whole slew of telescopes there. And my role, we're trying to understand the building blocks of the solar system. Every molecule has a fingerprint, and we use infrared astronomy to measure all those fingerprints for those molecules. And then we quantify or we measure how many of those species are there. And they fold into models. We try and develop these huge computational models to understand how our solar system formed. So I spent a lot of my time trying to quantify the gas and ice in comets. I was on the discovery team for the interstellar object that came from another solar system and whipped through our solar system, called 1I Oumuamua, and I was on the team that discovered the second one of these. So we're finding things coming from other solar systems passing through ours. And it's just great to be on the forefront of things, newly discovered objects. And when I started astronomy, we only knew of planets in our own solar system. Now there's thousands of other solar systems out there. And the latest space-based missions that I'm involved in will now start looking at the possibility of life in other solar systems outside our own. And in my career, to see that in 20 years, that's phenomenal. And that's just, every day it's great to see these new results.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think we often hear that, say, places like Nevada or the deserts are good places to have such telescopes, but presumably Hawaii is as well.
Yes, so the best in the world is Antarctica, and I've had friends go there. It's on my list. I haven't gone there. It's believe it or not, it's the driest place around. It's not actually deserts and you might think of. The second best in the world is Mauna Kea in Hawaii. We're high above all the wet clouds, and we have 325 days of the year where we have the best observing conditions in the world. And you get the more stable the sky is, the clearer the sky is, the better your signal and more reliable your results after you analyze the signal.
Excellent. So it sounds like really exciting kind of frontier type work then.
Yes, I love it. It's challenging too, because you're working with technology, which sometimes doesn't like to work. So you have to problem solve most nights, and sometimes things don't cooperate. But it's wonderfully new stuff. And every year the instruments are more sensitive. So if you go back and look at the same object, you'll find more molecules that are the weaker species that are key to plugging into your models to see how these things formed, and then apply them to other galaxies and other solar systems. So it's invigorating research.
And I'm sure perhaps some in our audience might be thinking, well, yeah, that sounds really interesting, but why does it matter that we know this?
I mean, that is a philosophical question. Some of the key things why it matters is we're trying to understand where water is in the solar system. It's not as simple as saying, yeah, Earth is wet. In fact, Earth is one of the driest bodies in the solar system. Whereas the icy planets in the outer solar system is where all the water ice and things like that. So for the prospecting missions, which the space age is really taken off again. There was a lull in the 90s and 2000s for those of us, but now you have all the private industry driven by Amazon and SpaceX, and there's a new frontier out there that is now within our reach and can be done with private industry rather than government industry. So I moved to NASA right after my PhD to work on space mission stuff. And I was there for 3.5 years in the Bay Area. And then I moved to Hawaii through a NASA program on astrobiology, which was looking for the signatures of life throughout the solar system. So it's just, again, it's a philosophical question. But one of the things when you do physics is that you're working on technology that's applicable across many fields. And a key thing I would say is semiconductor physics, which is what I learned about in NUIG, is going to be crucial in the next coming years for quantum computing. Anybody who's thinking about what's in the future, quantum computing heavily depends on superconducting semiconductors and superconducting technology. And you need to understand those fundamentals, and you'll get those in a physics degree. And I enjoyed very much with the NUIG physics, being exposed to nuclear energy, being exposed to medical imaging, being able to pick electives that allowed me to see how physics is used in the real day world. So you don't narrow your field of vision when you specialize in physics. You can actually broaden it by taking these electives.
Sure, indeed. And it's the case, of course, that the physics degree has opportunities for students now to take streams in biomedical physics or in theoretical or climate. And maybe there's one more I'm missing. I can't remember, Liz.
Biomedical applied astrophysics.
Astro, yes, of course, obviously. I mean, it's the one we're effectively talking about. I have one more question though, Jacqueline, and you mentioned that you're using the various instrumentation also to analyze the signatures that you see from those chemicals. So presumably there's actually some chemistry involved as well as physics along the way, right? Is that right?
Well, you're not detecting. Well, yes, you detect the molecules, and you're able to determine their abundance, and you're able to determine the temperature they're at, and then you use your understanding of chemistry to infer how these molecules were created. So, what reactions cause them. But what's important for us is that we get to measure the relative ratios of these species. We compare two species to each other, and that tells you which chemical pathway dominated when that molecule was around, and then you can understand how that incorporated into the comet and what temperature the comet was formed at. So then you know where in the solar system it got formed, because as you go further away from the sun, it gets colder. So then you're able to analyze where that was formed in the solar system.
So potentially this might even give some possible clues as to whether there's extraterrestrial life as well, or was or is.
Oh, yes. I mean, there is no doubt we'll find biosignatures, carbon signatures, because it's a standard footpath or that happens through all these processes. You start with hydrogen and helium and carbon, and they all lead to complex, bigger species. Whether you find another human, I don't know, but there's certainly signatures of carbon molecules, yes.
Okay. So pretty amazing that you could find all of that out whilst still standing on Earth.
Oh yes, in fact, it's a shame we don't get to go in spaceships. So, yeah.
Excellent. So Liz, you've presented some of the slides there on the climate stream. Why have you launched the climate stream?
Well, I guess it's such a major topic, and it's only going to become more and more important over the coming years. I guess a lot of you people that are online are fully engaged with the climate crisis, and we our science, like we have got this research centre out in Connemara in a very remote location on the edge of the Atlantic, and because of the position of the research centre, we're able to measure the cleanest air in Europe. It's like the baseline for air pollution in the Northern Hemisphere. So because of this unique and very sophisticated measuring site we've really contributed to climate science over the last number of decades. But we think it's a perfect time to launch this degree because the climate crisis is on everyone's lips and minds at the moment. So it's a great opportunity for studies for students that maybe fully engage with the climate, the climate, to be able to gain a degree in physics and specialize in climate.
For sure. And I would say that many of our prospective students might be quite aware of our environmental science and marine science, and maybe even our earth and ocean science degrees, and the relevance of those to understanding the environment, understanding climate change, and the science around sustainability. But they might be less aware, I guess, of the really important role that physics, as you've outlined for us, has in this area, and in measuring the concentrations of, say, carbon and methane and air quality and the atmospheric physics that's really strong at Galway, and particularly given our relationship with Macehead. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important that maybe our audience realizes this is part of the story and our approach to understanding.
I guess, yeah, and to come up with any solutions, we really need to understand the fundamental processes that are causing climate change. And what Jacqueline was just talking about there, about like curiosity about the processes and like chemistry and physics coming together. A lot of that is true of studying atmospheric physics also.
Sure. And could you tell me then, tell our audience what the difference might be, say, in choosing to study physics through GY 301 or joining through that, as I said, standalone degree GY 320?
Okay, so you can specialize in climate physics or applied physics through GY 301. So these are the undenominated science, and through both of these pathways, you get like course physics skills that you can then apply to anything. But in terms, if you specialize in climate physics, obviously you'll do it through the climate lens. However, if you choose to study GY 320, you can also specialize in astrophysics, in biomedical physics, or in theoretical physics. So there are 5 physics pathways available. So if you want to study astrophysics or specialize in astrophysics, for example, GY 320 is the way to do it. Okay. In climate physics, you do some additional modules such as sustainability and megatrends that give you an overview of, I suppose, other factors besides the hard physics in terms of environmental solutions.
Sure. I'm also scanning the questions we're getting in, and there's one from Carenza here, which says that I'm a student still in secondary school, struggling with choosing a course to study. Do you know any useful resources for people who are having difficulty choosing which field of science or engineering to go into? Well, I think it's a very fair question. I would say that evenings like this evening will hopefully help, but equally, you might consider coming to our taster day in the new year, or our next open day, which I think will be in April, though we'll be confirming that. But equally, you can ask a question of any of our course directors by going to the course webpage and clicking on the Ask button. So that should help, I think. I would also compare the course descriptions. So go to each of the web pages and have a look at the modules you do from year to year, because as I said earlier, if you see a lot of modules that firstly might not be the type of modules you thought would be associated with that degree, and if you think you wouldn't enjoy doing them, well, then it's likely not the degree for you. If you find that you see modules that do look interesting and you think you'd enjoy them, well, then maybe that's something you could keep on your long list for the moment, because I really think that if you're not happy and you don't enjoy studying a particular subject, you're unlikely to do really well. I'm going to move along and bring Cian into the conversation. You can hear me all right, Cian?
Yep, can hear you perfect, Gavin.
So Cian, you studied microbiology, isn't that right?
Yeah, I did.
So could you tell us about your experience? You were, I imagine, a GY 301 student. So how did you make that decision? And then how did you end up specializing in microbiology?
So basically, when I came to college, I didn't know which science I wanted to do. So I knew that I really liked science, but I had no idea what I wanted. So I would say to anyone that isn't sure of what to do, I would definitely do general science. So each year you get to specialize a little bit more, you know, you get to do what you're interested in. And by the time fourth year comes around, you've ended up with a subject that you're extremely interested in, and you have it right there.
And Cian, which other subjects did you take along the way? So in third year, you had microbiology and another.
So I did biochemistry in third year, along with microbiology. The two of them paired very nicely together. But in second year, I did chemistry along with microbiology and biochemistry. Okay,
and you think overall that was a good combination of subjects to get you to final year then?
I thought it was fantastic. I thought that having a background in chemistry and biochemistry going into fourth year microbiology really helps you understand how to apply things and how to just even understand different things that are going on in your course. And yeah, I think it is a really good idea to do general science.
Mm-hmm. So that's GY 301. And did you take some other electives along the way?
No, I just took the straight up chemistry, microbiology, and biochemistry.
I see. Okay,
yeah.
Very good. And could you tell us what microbiology was like and what it's generally all about?
So generally, microbiology is all about the microorganisms that inhabit the planet and the different ways they can, say, cause infections in the body, how they play a role in the environment, how we can then use them in the environment to clean up problems that we've caused. But in 40, you get a really nice bit of every type of microbiology. And then let's say I branched into environmental after my degree, and I'm now doing a PhD with Gavin. So that's another thing. Anyone that thinks that doing general science, may not be as specialized or may not cover as much, it does. It covers, I would say, even more than denominated courses, because you can do what you're interested in. And you can really pair different electives together to get a really full picture of what's going on.
Sure. And I imagine that throughout your experience, you've been in some large classes with hundreds of students, but also in some smaller ones.
Yeah. So definitely as the years go on, you start getting involved in smaller classes, smaller little groups, which I think is very good, because you start, as you learn more, you can start bouncing off other people in smaller groups. You can start learning off what they know. And I think it is a really good environment to enter.
Mm-hmm. And you happened, I guess, to have your final year coinciding with COVID lockdown, didn't you?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I did the
How was
entirety of my
that?
fourth year.
How was that for you?
Um, I was kept busy anyway, which was the main thing, which I think was probably the best, just to have something to do, something to put your mind to, for the entirety of that year.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And could you tell me a little bit then about other activities you might have gotten up to in Galway during your undergrad years? Were there any societies or other events that you got in?
I played hurling with the college for 2 years, and then I did kayaking quite a lot as well, which is honestly great. If anyone is coming to the college, enter into as many societies as you can. You get to know so many people. You make a lot of friends, which I think is very nice. And just get involved. I think it's a great thing.
Great. I just take a few more questions for the moment then from the chat. So one person has asked whether it's possible to take some languages with science and with GY 301. Yes is the answer. So there are various electives or optional modules that you can take along the way, depending on your combinations to make up your required credits each year. So it will be possible, for example, to take some modules through Irish. So there's a relatively limited number, but nonetheless, there are some that you can take through Irish. There's also French and German, for example, that you can take as optional modules. And another questioner asks whether, well, actually, just before I leave languages, some of our other science degrees, say, for example, biotechnology, has built into its schedule of modules French or German as well. So yes is the answer. You can take some languages if you really want to. Another question asks whether GY 301 is the only way to study zoology. It's not, no, to be fair. It's the only way to earn a degree in zoology. So following the zoology pathway as one of the three you'd pick in second year and keeping it in third year and through to fourth year is the way to get a BSc in zoology. So yes, that's GY 301. However, several of the other degrees might allow you to take some zoology. So for example, if you take the environmental science degree, so that is GY 308, I think, that will allow you to take several zoology modules along the way. So you'd have plenty of options and some of them can be zoology. Equally, the BSc in marine science offers the chance to have quite a strong focus on zoology and on marine zoology. And we have some really accomplished colleagues who are doing some fascinating research on the sea floor and the deep oceans on marine zoology. So I think those are also some really great ways to get zoology under your belt as well. So I hope that answers that question. Could you tell me, Liz, you've already taken the first group of climate physicists, or it'll be next September? I just can't remember.
Well, second year, there are some second years doing climate physics now. So they're currently studying some core physics modules, as well as looking at sustainability and kind of global megatrends.
Mhm. And there's obviously field work potentially built in along the way somewhere.
Yeah. So as part of the practical work during the degree, we get to use the data and the instruments at Macehead in Carna, which is the atmospheric
Mhm.
laboratory out in
Right.
Connemara.
I could be wrong, but I'm getting the impression that possibly prospectus is some kind of a bingo word in our chat. I think people are looking out for it, which sounds like a lot of fun. Could I maybe just lastly then turn back to Jacqueline, and I kind of wonder, like, is there a gender imbalance, do you think, in physics and in astronomy?
So I got my degree in '96, so we can date each other that. When I was doing my degree, and I know there are one or two people asking questions about how many in the course, and it changes with time. When I was in my final fourth year in '96, I guess, there were almost 20 of us, and there were 3 girls out of that. But I come from a family with 3 brothers, so that didn't bother me. But I will say the 3 girls were unique in that they did not go straight into Intel or AMD Athlon, because anybody who had a physics degree at that time walked straight into a wonderfully well-paid job, and still can. I point that out to anybody who's online. I went down the astronomy physics. I took a European master's under, I believe, an Erasmus program, and I got to go to Portugal and the Netherlands. NUIG offered me a PhD. Also, the University in Holland did, and I decided to take the one in Holland, and that started my career. The 2 others, one did medical physics, and the other girl did, I believe, environmental science. So we all had core physics degrees, but we all went separate ways. So you can do anything, I believe, with a physics degree, engineering, and you can even these days go into the biological fields, because you get a lot of programming, a lot of mathematical skills, a lot of skills needed for what's that big buzzword now, which is big data. And so you learn how to assess, interpret, and analyze, and use tools and problem solve.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jacqueline. So I'm going to answer one last question before we wrap things up for science. And let me just say that I hope that although we've concentrated tonight on physics, that we've still at least given you the impression and gotten across to you that there's a huge diversity of topics that you can study in science. But the last question I see here is whether there are any areas of science that could lead into veterinary medicine or science. I think this is a very typical question we get. We sometimes get the question as to whether there's some areas of science that can lead into medicine, into nutrition, into dietetics, into forensic science, and so on and so on. And I would suggest that yes, it is certainly possible to earn your primary degree in an area of science that will be relevant then for subsequent postgrad work. So it's possible to say do graduate medicine. It's possible to do a master's, to get training in dietetics or nutrition, or in forensic science if you say had chemistry or something relevant. So it certainly is the case, yes, that taking your example, the questioner in the chat, that were you say to have quite a bit of zoology, that this might then place you in a good starting position then for further graduate study. Okay, so we might get to some more of those questions later on, and we'll, I think, have copied them anyway, so we'll be aware of what was asked. So with that, I'm going to make the transition then over to the next hour, and I'd like to thank my guests, Jacqueline Keane. So thanks so much, Jacqueline, for taking time out of your time back in Ireland, because I think you're back in the country now.
Yes, I'm just home for the week. Yeah, so thank you.
So it's been very generous of you to give some of your evening to us, and I'm very grateful. And also to Liz, thanks very much, Liz. I'll be in touch. And Keane, I'll see you in the lab.
Thanks, Gavin.
Okay, so thanks all three, and I will share my screen again then, and I'll ask Cullum, my colleague Cullum O'Riordan. Dr. O'Riordan is the course director for the degree in computer science, and also Joyanne to put your cameras on. And what I am going to do is to share my screen again, and I will start the next hour. Okay, so we're just coming up to 8 o'clock then, and with thanks to Jacqueline, Liz, and Cian, I'm going to then move into the next part of my presentation, which is focused on engineering and computer science. So let me just preface this by saying that at NUI Galway, the scientists and engineers have come together now in one college under one virtual roof. And a quotation we like to use is that scientists discover the world that exists and engineers create the world that never was. So scientists explore and discover, and engineers create. And we've come together to innovate. And that's essentially what we're trying to do by cooperating together in science and engineering. And I think you've just heard from the science hour, and I think you'll see lots of similarities in terms of the skills and how we speak about the subjects in this next hour when we talk about informatics and computer science and software, and also all the different areas of engineering. So I am indeed focusing on engineering and computer science, and I'll tell you again, if in case you've just joined for this hour, I'll very briefly tell you a little bit about the university, even less than I told you about it in the last hour, because the whole thing will be recorded. But I'll then move on to ask the question, why engineering, and what engineering at NUI Galway is all about, and how you can study engineering with us. Something about our work placements and the career prospects in engineering. I'll show you a couple of pictures of our engineering home, the Alice Perry building at NUI Galway. And I'll then give a brief summary on computer science, but I do have my colleague Cullum here who will be able to answer some more questions then afterwards. And I'll give some closing thoughts on all of that. So a little bit about the university. I mentioned in the last hour we're among the top universities globally, and you'll be able to look back on the recording, but it refers to our place in the World University Rankings. We also take sustainability very seriously, and that matters for the last hour for science, but absolutely also for engineering. One of the major focus of our engineering indeed is on energy engineering and developing the technologies we'll need for this century to deliver on the energy supplies, and indeed the security of energy supplies that will be required, including to tackle climate change. So we've been teaching and learning engineering for a long time, for over 172 years now. So there's a long experience and a deep heritage at the university. The university first was Queen's College Galway. It later was University College Galway. It's now NUI Galway. But in 1906, Alice Perry became the first woman in the UK or Ireland to graduate with an engineering degree, and it was at then Queen's College Galway. So for that reason, our engineering building is the Alice Perry Engineering Building. And if you choose to study engineering with us, you'll be able to have most of your classes and your labs and your learning, and you'll be able to hang out as well in the Alice Perry building. So uniquely, we've been able to bring all of our students literally under one roof to study engineering. Okay, so I'll come back to the building again later in these slides, but I'll ask now, well, why engineering? So, if you want to be an engineer, what might be your contribution to society? So you want to be an engineer. Who are they anyway, and what do they do? Well, engineers enhance the world we live in. They use maths, science, design, analytical skills. They're builders, they're innovators, they're inventors, they're problem solvers. They work indoors and outdoors. They work in small and big teams, often multidisciplinary teams, maybe along with scientists, and maybe even along with, say, legal and business and arts people as well. So increasingly, the workplace is becoming multidisciplinary. But engineers work on land, at sea, in space. So essentially, they do literally work everywhere. They also use all sorts of materials, including novel materials. And I guess ultimately they make and they design and make things that society needs. So there's several different types of engineers, and they're required everywhere in delivering those services and products and solutions that the world needs as we face new challenges. And some of those challenges are depicted in these two examples here. We've firstly got an aging global population. So you can see here in the blue numbers, this is the proportion of populations in these areas that are currently over 60. But in red, you see the proportion that will be 60 or over by 2050. So in many of the regions of the world, that number will be much higher by 2050. So we have, in general, an aging population. People are living longer, and with that comes lots of different challenges. And engineers sometimes have really surprising roles in meeting those challenges, from mobility to health to other types of well-being, to how we learn and communicate and are entertained and so on. Equally then, the other big example of a challenge, I would say, is oil dependency and energy and how we tackle climate change. So you can see the areas in the world where energy consumption per capita is really high. And in many of the areas around the world, in North America, in parts of Europe and Australia and so on, there is a huge dependency on oil. And how we shift away from that will require both scientists and engineers to develop the technology and to make sure that it's sustainable and reliable. Okay, so engineering at NUI Galway then, what do we offer? Well, there's several branches of engineering that you might choose to study. The first of those here is civil engineering, and I guess I would kind of wrap civil and environmental engineering together. And here engineers design the things that society needs, including, say, tunnels and bridges and buildings, roads and wind turbines and other renewable energy technologies. And in the middle there, you see a picture of a wastewater treatment plant that happens to be Mutton Island at Galway City. So increasingly, we will need civil engineers to build that new infrastructure to develop the sustainable economies and the circular bioeconomies that we all know that we need. Electrical and electronic and computer engineers then will make the software and the hardware we need in the increasingly, I guess, kind of internet influenced and technology and informatics influenced worlds that we occupy. So, everything from driverless cars to the phone in your pocket, which essentially is, a computer, and it's your shopping basket, and it's everything that the internet can allow you to do. But it's also the Internet of Things that, you can use an app on your phone to tell your Hoover to clean the house, or that every time you sit on a plane, that it's essentially a big flying computer. So how we cope with the changing ways that we live our lives to develop that software and the hardware, including how we integrate with electrical grids and so on, and computer chips and semiconductors, is the job of those engineers. Mechanical engineering then is concerned with moving parts of engines and machines and other instruments, including how liquids move and hydrodynamics. So everything from robots to cars to the blades on turbines to engines to even the devices that might be used in medicine, say artificial hips and joints and pins and so on that might end up in your body at some point. And a little brother or sister of mechanical engineering is biomedical engineering, and this will equally then include some of those med tech devices and medical implants, heart valves and stents, skin grafts, studying how bones are laid down and how we might be able to engineer solutions to broken bones and to problems with bone health. And then energy systems engineering, or just energy engineering, relates to the big challenge of how we develop novel technologies to get us past the climate and energy crisis that we know about now. So how we develop solar and wind, geothermal, hydropower, hydrogen power, biomass and biofuels, and how we move past fossil fuels, even including tidal and wave energy. All of those challenges and opportunities will need a new generation of energy engineers who will be able to support and push on that new economy. So there are obviously huge opportunities that will have massive demands for new people and new ways of thinking because there's so much opportunity for innovation in this area. Okay, so how would you go about studying engineering with this then? Well, you could be an engineer if you enjoy maths, science, technical subjects in general. If you're interested in new technology, in phones and infrastructure and how things work in computers and buildings, in energy and medical devices. So ask yourself, do you want to be a new technology user, when the next phone or whatever gadget comes out? Or do you actually want to understand how it works? And maybe do you want to make the next one? So, answering those sorts of questions will help you maybe identify yourself potentially as a possible engineer. So you could indeed be an engineer if you have a H5 in 2 subjects, H7 or O6 in 4, including a lab science subject, and H4 in Leaving Cert maths, or you pass a special maths exam that we have. So we stage a special maths exam after the Leaving Cert, usually in August each year, and that can be another way to meet the maths requirements. We get a question sometimes, do I have to be really good at maths? The answer is no, you don't. Maths is going to be important along the way at key points for engineers, but no, you don't have to be a maths genius at all. In the same way as you don't have to be a scientist, and in the same way as you don't have to have all of chemistry, physics, and biology to be a scientist, you also don't have to be really super good at maths to be a good engineer. So you'll learn by doing. You'll learn by sitting in lectures, by being in workshops and labs, and doing group work and project work with your classmates, field work, and even exciting things like here there's pictures of the mechanical engineering students who've been working with the GEEK car. That's the Galway energy efficiency car, and they've won lots of prizes and races at international events that have really put the GEEK on the map. So each new generation of Mech-Eng students get involved in developing that a little bit more. So to study engineering then, you will come into first year either on the undenominated engineering degree GY 401, or you can come to us directly on one of the other engineering programs on biomedical, mechanical, electrical, electronic, or electronic and computer, or civil or energy. So either way is fine. Many students like the choice that is available by coming through the undenominated degree and then subsequently from second year onwards joining one of those other branches that you can see here. You don't have a different experience in first year. So the first year engineering experience is practically similar across all of these options. It's just that you leave your options open or you go directly into one of those branches. So you shouldn't worry about whether you may not get into one of those different degrees in second year. So it is possible to come to first year and then subsequently make your choice. You'll then stay with us for either 4 years for a bachelor's of engineering, or for a full 5 years, and after that point you'll earn a master's of engineering. So we offer an integrated bachelor's and master's of engineering. And if you're staying for 4 years only, then you'll take your work placement between years 3 and 4. If you're staying for 5 years, you'll do your work placement later. Equally then, we have one additional degree, and that is project construction and management. And that happens to be a BSc, but everything you learn really is related to engineering. But that's a separate degree that you can apply for. So if you're interested in project and construction management, take a look at that. Okay, so there's a few really attractive elements then, I would say, about studying engineering with us. And one of those is work placements and what that means for your future career prospects. So all of our engineering students get to do a paid work placement. And they'll undertake that work placement with an employer. And we'll also give you during this time the chance to develop other career skills. You'll have one-to-one CV reviews, you'll have interview skills training. So the idea is to get you career prepared and to get you as ready as possible. So during this time, you'll also develop your communication skills, teamwork, ethics, and professional skills, and all of those are provided to prepare you for the working environment. So here are just some examples of the employers that work with us on the engineering placements: Dell, Aerogen, and Intel, Cisco, and others. So there's a pretty wide diversity, because you see Merit Medical here as well. So there's a diversity of employers who are involved in the process. And as I'd said in the previous hour, we'll provide a PDF version of this set of slides on our College of Science and Engineering website. So in that PDF, you'll be able to download it if you like, and you'll be able to click on some of those videos. So you can watch videos of our students and see what they say about their experience on their paid placements. So there's a student from biomedical engineering, mechanical engineering, electronic and computer, and from civil engineering. You can hear from there. Women in engineering is something that we're really very focused on as well. And I had asked Jacqueline in the last hour about gender imbalances potentially in physics. And, some subjects get a bad reputation for having a poor gender balance. And these are for historical reasons and preconceptions about what subjects are all about and who they're for. But I'm glad to say that we've been making really good progress in balancing the gender balance in engineering at NUI Galway over the last few years. We're now kind of creeping up towards 30% of our students being female in engineering. So we're really happy that we're moving in the right direction. And engineering really, as I said earlier, is focused on problem solving. And it isn't only the male half of the global population that's going to face all of these challenges. Everyone will. So it wouldn't be a good idea if we only had male engineers. So I would suggest really strongly that, of course, engineering is for everybody. It's for boys and girls, for women and men. And you can hear from some of our really successful female engineers including watching these videos on women in engineering from Engineers Ireland, from one of our MECEng students about the geek that I mentioned earlier, and one of my colleagues, Emer Dolan, who recorded a video here for International Women in Engineering Day. So, you know, I think if you are possibly interested in engineering, if you think you are curious about the topics I mentioned earlier on, for sure, talk to us at an open day or ask a question later on, and we'll try to point you in the right direction. You can see where our engineering graduates end up working. So there's just a selection of graduates here, and they're in all sorts of companies, including civil, mechanical, biomedical engineering, and electronic engineering. So just as there is a diversity of programs, there's also a clear diversity of employers and careers as well. Okay, so briefly, I can show you our engineering home, the Alice Perry building I mentioned earlier. It's the largest school of engineering in the country. It's one big dedicated building which has all of the offices for the lecturers and the technicians and the administrative staff. All of the students learn there, go to lectures, attend workshops, do their labs, and all the research in engineering is done there as well. And there's a place to have coffee and to eat. So it really is a really kind of hub that you can call your own and consider your home on campus as an engineering student. It's unique in many ways in that it's really a living building, and it's essentially a living laboratory. You can watch a video all about the building here, but you'll notice if you find yourself walking through the building that you'll be able to see the concrete and the steel and all the ducting and the wires and so on that go into making the bits and pieces of the building. So as an engineering student, that's something that you'll be able to revel in as well. So lastly then, as we transition to the next portion of the evening, which will be a discussion with Colm and Joanne on computer science, let me just introduce you a little to computer science at NUI Galway. So again, you'll be able to, if you take the PDF of these slides from our web afterwards, you'll be able to click on this video from my colleague, Professor Michael Madden. So Mike is the head of the School of Computer Science at NUI Galway. So you'll be able to go through and listen to his slides that explore computer science at NUI Galway. But in general terms, this is a degree that's about computers and computing systems and our relationship with them. You'll have theoretical learning and you'll learn about algorithms and data structures, the whole way through to practical work where you get a chance to develop software and implement the algorithms and actually see your work put to use. It also includes artificial intelligence, and I guess this certainly does speak to the increasingly deep role that computer science has in our day-to-day lives. So from AI to human-computer interaction, from programming language through to networks and visual and graphic processing. So you'll learn about computer science and software engineering. You'll get a strong and broad base of computing skills. It's a 4-year honours degree. There's work placement in there. There's a hands-on project and teamwork. There is also an optional extra maths stream, and it's a highly respected professional degree. In fact, it's one of only 2 professionally accredited software engineering degrees in the country, the other one being in TCD. So you'll have lots of problem-based learning on this degree. It's GY 350, and perhaps in a few minutes we can come back to this slide and Colm can help us talk through it a little more. But in terms of careers, there's a huge variety, because again, if you think of the challenges that relate to this area, clearly there will be a big variety of career opportunities as well. Software developer has consistently for a while been ranked in some of the best jobs in various surveys and analysis. So this one from this website that you can click on here as well, the 100 best jobs of 2020, #1 was software developer. And then whether it's for you, well, just as with engineering, if you think that you might be kind of switched on with problem solving, creating new things, applying logic and so on, then for sure, GY 350 may well be the degree for you. There are other ways to study computer science, and I might ask you about that in a moment as well, Colm. So not just on GY 350, but our art students, I think, can get a flavor of this, and it is possible to do some computer science through GY 301 as well. So to just offer some closing thoughts before we go into the last phase of this evening to chat with Colm and Joyanne. If you want to be an engineer, then equally, just as I said earlier on, you can do your research by getting a version of our prospectus. We can post it to you, as I said earlier on. You can go to our CAO hub and you can see the web address there on number 2. Look at our course web pages. So just as with science, each of the engineering degrees has its own course web page, as too does the GY 350 degree. So there you can compare courses and again see which would be the subjects you can do year by year. So it's possible even to click on a module and see who teaches on that, what the main objectives or learning outcomes will be, and really get a feeling for the nuts and bolts of what you would experience. And I strongly recommend that you try to spend some time doing that and then start knocking things off your long list and keeping some things on so that you can change a long list of courses into your short list. And then maybe come to an open day or a taster day once you have your shortlist and really get a chance to ask some detailed questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. So I previously gave a list of all of the shortcuts to our science degree web pages, but here equally you can just type in nuigalway.ie/GY. This time all the engineering degrees are 4 something something. So 401 is undenominated, and you can see the whole way down through 2, 5, 6, 8, 10, 13, 14 are all of those others. But computer science and information technology is GY 350. So that's the one I had just been speaking about a few moments ago. Okay, so just as with the list of videos I gave earlier for science, you equally here can get a long list of videos that can tell you more about engineering, including about some of the exciting research that we're doing and the work placements and so on. So I think I will stop there on engineering, and I'm going to now introduce you to Dr. Colm O'Riordan, who's the director of GY 350 Computer Science, and Joyanne Giuguna, I hope I got that right, Joyanne, who is a student on the GY 350 degree. So if I could maybe start with yourself, Colm.
Sure.
Thanks for joining me. So who is the GY 350 degree for then? Could you tell us?
Okay, that's a good question. It's a hard one to answer too. You mentioned problem solving earlier, and again, I'd echo that. I think for people who have an interest in solving problems, not necessarily classical kind of mathematical problems. In computer science, we deal with some abstract problems, which are mathematical, but also a lot of applied problems, where oftentimes we're interested in taking our computing knowledge and applying it to other domains, which involves trying to study or understand other domains and then apply the techniques we have in computing to those domains. So even with our final year projects, we have students applying computer science techniques and data analysis techniques in sports, music, health, monitoring people's behavior online to identify certain changes in behavior. So I think any student in secondary school who likes problem solving and possibly likes tackling problems across a broad range of domains would be suitable for computer science.
Sure.
Their mathematical content, and I think people who enjoy mathematics tend to enjoy computer science. However, we have a strong cohort every year who excel at computer science, but would also advocate that they don't really like mathematics. And I think part of it is possibly the depth and breadth of mathematics that is taught in secondary school. Some of that becomes extremely useful in your computer science degree. Other parts you won't use as much. And I get the impression that people who think they don't like mathematics actually do enjoy large sections of it and enjoy the application of that. So I think anybody who enjoys problem solving, and if you have a mathematical slant, that's probably a bonus.
Sure. Okay. So you don't have to be a genius at maths, but it would help if you enjoyed at least some of the relevant.
I think so. We find students who enjoy mathematics tend to enjoy computer science, some of the logic and some of the problem solving. However, we often find students coming in who didn't enjoy mathematics, but after a year or two computer science have a slightly different perspective on mathematics and how much they enjoy it or not. And also, I should say, our maths requirements are slightly less than the requirements for the other engineering degrees you mentioned. We take students who have, I think, an O2 in ordinary mathematics as well. We used to have a standard that was equivalent to the other engineering degrees, but we changed it and found that it had really no impact on the quality of the students coming in, nor the level that the students kind of obtained.
So could you tell me, what would, say, a new computer science student expect to do then? Will they spend most of their time in lectures or in computer labs, or what else?
Okay, well, it's a combination. We have lectures where you cover through the main concepts, but there is a very strong practical aspect to the degree. So every subject is backed up with labs. Some of those are supervised labs, others are more kind of self-managed, where you're given assignments to do. And we also, from second year on, also have several group projects where the size of the project being developed would probably be too much for one person. So we try and teach the kind of benefits of teamwork and group work while giving the students larger tasks to do. First year is very much an introductory year. We make the assumption that students haven't programmed before. Now that's beginning to change, in that we have more and more students coming in with a background in computing, but traditionally the majority of our students had no previous experience. So in first year, we teach the fundamentals of programming, algorithms, and also fundamentals of physics, some mathematics, some electronics. Second and third year, then there's a lot of work on programming, software development, a lot of stuff on database theory, networks, and really all the kind of core modules we would have the students up to speed in the first 3 years. There's then a big 8-month placement in a company, typically local Galway companies, but often Athlone, Cork, Galway, and a few, or Dublin, and a few abroad. And fourth year then, we tend to deliver a range of specialisms where the students have probably more options to choose from, subjects like artificial intelligence, machine learning, information retrieval, graphics and image processing, security and forensics, and also a sizable final year project where the students are allowed to choose or propose their own project, where they can kind of tailor their final year to what interests them the most. So if they have an interest in HCI and hate networking, then they choose a project in HCI and spend more time exploring the areas they like.
Sorry, what is HCI?
Oh, sorry, human computer interaction.
Okay.
So this is how we interact with a machine in terms of interface design. And a lot of that is inspired by work in kind of psychology. Again, the problem domain involves a certain kind of mathematical aspect, but also a lot on kind of human behavior and behavioral issues as well. And it's becoming a larger a larger area, given that computing is becoming more prevalent in everyday life.
Sure, yeah. And I want to come back to that maybe in a few minutes, you know, the creep of technology into almost every aspect of our lives and what that means for careers as well then. But I'm just going to hop over to Joanne just for a moment. So, hi, Joanne.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Really good.
Good. So you are one of the students in the final year class, isn't that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
final year computer science.
Exactly. So how many people are in the class?
So I'd say right now we're about 60.
Okay.
We were more or less 70 or 80 in first year, but you know, you get dropouts
Yeah.
for people who don't really
So that's
want to continue.
yeah, quite a decent size. Yeah.
Yeah.
And could you tell us what you've enjoyed most so far about the degree?
I'd say the best part was the placement. So for us, we got 7 months in a company and it was paid as well. So you're getting experience and also you don't have to worry about getting another job while you're doing it. It was really nice to meet people who are currently working in the field. You know, they give you loads of advice. You get to see how the languages of programming that you learn is applied in the actual, you know, real companies, which is really, it was really eye-opening. I think at that point, you decide on kind of what you want to do. For example, if you want to do more front end, like Colm was talking about HCI, UI design, that you can get experience in doing that in the company. And they're usually very accommodating in providing you with the experience that you want, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm. And could you tell us a little bit about what your placement involved?
Okay, so I was working at Genesis. It's a US-based company, but they have offices in Galway as well. So I was in the predictive engagement AI department, so artificial intelligence department. So basically what Genesis does is they're a cloud solution for call centers. So basically if you have a problem and you call, let's say Ticketmaster, and you want a refund or something. So Genesis gives the software that provides the agent that picks up your call, and then they can accurately help you. So it's basically a predictive learning software that adapts to behaviors that you do online, and it gives you the results you want. So it takes away the time also that you'd spend looking for something that doesn't apply to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
so just another example of an innovation, I guess then, yeah. And were you the only person from the class at that company?
No, there were about 5 of us. That was a pretty good number.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so you got to work with them as well, did you?
Well, no, not in my team, but we did have events that we got to see each other. There's loads of different departments. There was a machine learning department. There was AI as well. There was DevOps. It was a couple different. It was a good variety. We were all spread out just so that we could get different experiences as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'd say that once you get that experience, it's really easy to go back to them after you finish your final year. So for example, I'm still working for Genesis currently, and after I do my exams and everything, I can continue to work with them after as well. So that's a really nice path that you have. Once you get that internship, you're basically set.
Sure, because I was going to ask, you know, do you think you'd be able to get a good reference from them? But perhaps you won't need it if you can indeed stay with them, right?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. That's a really big selling point for this course, actually, because the placement is what many companies look at. They look at your experience. You know, what have you done to apply all the skills that you've been learning in class? And it also gives you a chance to develop your social skills. Like even though it's like a course completely focused on programming, you also need to learn how to talk to your teammates and make presentations and all that. And that's a really good way to learn how to do that.
Sure, yeah, it's a different context than every day at university, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And you know, certainly from what I hear, you know, our students on, say, the science degrees like biotechnology and biopharmaceutical chemistry or environmental health and safety that offer work placements, and from all of the engineering students that have their paid work placements. There are similar stories for sure that this is an eye-opening time where you really get to see how the things that you've been learning about are actually done in the real world and in companies. But I've also often heard that it's a really great opportunity to develop a relationship with an employer and to at least get a good reference. But I think it's fascinating to hear your story, Joyanne, that it can then be possible to actually secure a longer term relationship with the employer as well.
Yeah, actually on that, usually they offer you a position before you start your final year. So even before your contract for your internship ends, they usually offer, well, some companies, not all obviously, but they usually do try and keep you on because they've already put so much time and effort into you. They don't want to let you go into another company.
Sure,
yeah,
for sure. Just so that we paint a picture generally about student life and especially about your degree, could you tell us what were most of your, say, assessments or exams like? Were they assignments that you turned in yourself, or were they normally sit-down exams, or a mixture of both, or project work? What was the general breakdown?
yeah. So usually it's 40% maybe for continuous assessment, and you have about 60 for exams. So you have a pretty good balance. You know, you can build up your grade to the point where if you don't do so well in exams, you still get a passing mark or first class honors even. So yeah, it's a good mixture. Last year, since COVID happened, it was online exams, and then in one module we did a 3-day project instead of an exam. So that was a change, but it was really interesting to do that as well.
Sure, and there are different ways of learning as well as different ways of assessing, aren't there? And
Yeah,
different ways of learning will suit different people. And like often the way you learn at university will be different to the way you'll have learned at school, right?
yeah, I'd say that. It's a completely different environment. I mean, you're leaving home to come, well, especially me, I'm an international student. So I left home and I came here alone. So it is character building, and the skills that you learn every day, you're going to apply it in your job, in everything, which is, I think, a really good aspect of your learning experience that you need to develop.
Sure, absolutely. Could I come back to you, Colm, then, and perhaps, you know, I'm reasonably aware that you and your colleagues do a lot of teaching around the university. So what are the various ways that students might be able to study computer science, if not through GY 350?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think it's a source of confusion sometimes for secondary school students as to which of the various options. So the degree we've been talking about, the computer science and IT, is probably the kind of heaviest or the kind of purest in terms of computer science. You can also do computing and electronic, which you mentioned earlier, which comes through the engineering, which is, if you like, some of the software aspects from the computer science degree, but with a much heavier weighting on hardware and the electronic kind of underpinnings behind it. One can also study information technology through the humanities, as an arts degree. And the advantages of that is, if you're not sure, or if you're interested in more than one subject. So let's say you're interested in IT, but you also have a passion for languages or economics or psychology, you can come in and do a joint degree. You choose 3 subjects in first year and then 2 subjects in second and third year. And what this allows is students to come out with a rather unique combination of subjects. So we've had students come through with maybe a language and computing, and then they're very equipped to work in areas like computational linguistics. Or we would have students come through who would study economics and computing, and then they could go in and look at notions of kind of computer modeling, etc. Computing and psychology, again, it opens up areas in usability, etc. And we find a lot of our students who come through the humanities often stay on for an extra year and do one of our masters in software development, or masters in artificial intelligence, or masters in data science, to bump up on a certain area within computing, having had a kind of a more general undergrad degree. And we get quite a few. I think Joanne mentioned about 60 students graduating in our GY 350. We would typically have 30 to 40 students graduating through the humanities with a IT and another subject. The one other stream, or the one other way that springs to mind, is that one can also do through science. You talked about the pathways earlier. There are 2 pathways which are computer oriented. One is in computer studies, where one would take some of the subjects on GY 350, but would complement it with quite a few other modules in mathematics, statistics, and physics. And it would be more of a mathematics degree than a computing degree, but you would have a fair exposure to computer science material. The data science pathway is similar, with more of an emphasis on statistics. And I think they're all the options. There is one in commerce as well, which is termed business information systems, which is more of a business degree, but it definitely has programming and databases. And the people who do that degree would typically work in the kind of financial sector or the business sector, where their knowledge of computing would be useful. They typically wouldn't go into development opportunities or programming opportunities.
Sure, but nonetheless, if someone wants to be a computer scientist, perhaps the safest bet is to at least consider GY 350. And
GY 350, yeah. You mentioned earlier, Gavin, as well, the undenominated stream in engineering. One can also transfer from that into GY 350 as well. That's been available for the last few years. We typically get a handful of students who come into the undenominated and choose to specialize then in computer science.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that, Colin, because we had a question about that in the chat as well. In fact, I guess what I would also ask is, I often get prospective students who ask me, if they were to study science, will they have to have a job where they always wear a lab coat for the next several decades? And my answer is no, because science careers can be anywhere. They can be at the bottom of the ocean, or they can be in a TV studio, or they can be anywhere. So I guess I have a similar question for computer science. I mean, if you become a computer scientist, does it mean you have to, say, sit in front of a monitor for the rest of your life, or how diverse are the jobs really?
Yeah, it's extremely diverse, and I think nowadays it's even more diverse than it was 10, 15 years ago. Like, we will have a large section of the class will possibly go into traditional development jobs, where there'll be programming for a large software house like SAP or Cisco, or you'll have a few will go into networks and telecommunications, doing work with the likes of Ericsson's, etc. There are an awful lot of smaller companies, small, ranging from a handful of people up to tens up to hundreds, who are hiring and doing a really exciting work in, like the company Joanne mentioned, Genesis, who are doing a really interesting work in artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and machine learning. But we have students who would have graduated with degrees who now work in I have two ex-students who work in, three actually, sorry, third one joined, in analyzing sports data for elite athletes. And their thing is to data mine the outcome of NBA basketball matches to make suggestions about training and positioning of players. These all had an interest in sport, but they never really studied sport per se. And what they're using is kind of pattern recognition and applying it to sports. And we have students in every sector. Computing has kind of permeated nearly every domain. So the financial sector had huge computing support. Health service has a huge computing support. All of the machines being developed in those domains all require a large kind of computational expertise. So our students end up in a range of domains, and I'm always kind of surprised when I bump into a student, 5-6 years after the degree, and they've usually had 2 to 3 exciting jobs since, and have moved sometimes quite far away from what they had started doing. And the story Joanne had there about companies offering positions after placement is becoming more and more typical. The companies now compete to try and get in early to recruit students. We've had companies looking to take 1/4 of our class at times, with the hope of, with the idea of offering them all a job after it. There are in demand at the moment, our students, a wide variety of jobs, and we have typically 100% employment. The only students who don't choose to take a job immediately in computing are those who go back for further study or decide to do something else. They might choose to go teaching computing, for example. They're still in the domain, but not actively progressing it as a developer per se. But the diversity is huge. It's I counted up there the companies that took students last year on placement, and I think it was 35 different companies around Ireland taking our 60-something students. And that includes the big multinationals who like to take 10 apiece. So yeah, it's great at the moment.
So this is really reassuring, isn't it? And it also sounds like maybe you're a little bit jealous, Colin, at some of the careers that your graduates and
it's nice to see that they have all of these opportunities, but some of the areas that are now available as jobs in industry were things when I was graduating, the only option to work in those was further research in the area. So a lot of areas in artificial intelligence, my own area, there weren't really many jobs in that. When I was graduating, it was still considered kind of futuristic and unrealistic. Whereas now there are so many domains where it's pivotal and outperforming human performance in a lot of domains. And it raises a wonderful set of questions on, can we improve? How can we control ethics, etc.? Jealous to a degree, but I'm quite happy to have all of these opportunities as well.
Indeed. I might just touch on a couple of questions that have been in the chat. I see my colleagues have been answering most of them, so thanks very much. There was one that came separately to me, and that was, does NUI Galway have any connections to car manufacturers for future possible jobs as a qualified mechanical engineer? The answer there is yes. I can't remember the name of the company, but there is a really strong link between engineering and some EV car manufacturers now. I'll look up the name of the company and put it into the chat before I close off the evening. Others have asked variations of this question, and that is, will I get my first choice in engineering in second year? So if, for example, you enter through undenominated engineering, will you then say get biomedical engineering if that's what you want? So the answer is yes. So you can, with confidence, come through under undenominated engineering, and then subsequently choose the pathway that you want. Another perhaps unusual question was, for biomedical engineering, would it be a problem if I'm afraid of blood? I don't think so. I think most, if not absolutely all of what you'll do will at least not require you to interact with blood. Okay, so I think to wrap things up then, I might just ask yourself, Colin, how did you get drawn to computer science?
Yeah, partially by accident. My main, when I was in secondary school, I was unsure as to what to do. And mathematics was the subject I always kind of liked. I was drawn to mathematics. But looking at university courses, I was also drawn to psychology, strangely. And I thought I might study that. But then studying the brochures, and I studied in UCC, if you studied mathematics, you could do it with another subject. And I chose computer science as my other subject because I was interested in kind of psychology and also the notion of artificial intelligence. So I thought I combined the two, but mathematics was my main kind of passion. But after, I think about 18 months, I kind of realized the aspects of mathematics that I most liked were the aspects that we were really studying in computer science. And that a lot of the areas in mathematics that we were doing in the maths degree, while I liked, were not as exciting as what I was doing in computer science. And then I swapped from doing a kind of a joint honors maths computer science to doing pure computer science. And again, during the degree, like Joanne mentioned about placement, I worked for various companies and one research group in the university. And I think by the time I'd finished the degree, I was kind of far more obsessed with computer science and the kind of theoretical aspects of computer science than I was pure mathematics. But I definitely didn't set out to become a computer scientist per se. You mentioned this earlier. I think some of the other speakers too. I didn't really have a plan. I had a passion or an interest in something, and I went with it. And even ending up teaching or lecturing wasn't part of my plan either. I liked the research. I stayed on to do a master's, then I stayed on to do a PhD and started doing some teaching, and I just kind of fell into it, and it gives me access to lots of nice problems. And you know, I think the interest I had back then, I still have, which is good.
I think this fairly much brings us full circle to Jacqueline's comment earlier that you know, it is possible to end up in an area that you perhaps didn't intend or imagine in the first place. And I think that really is something that might be quite valuable advice. I have since just looked up the name of the company for the person who asked whether we had connections between engineering and car companies. And the company is Valio, and they work with autonomous vehicles. And they're actually a County Galway based company. Okay, so with that, I think we'll bring the evening to a close. Unless any of my colleagues in the chat wanted me to mention anything else, I'll just keep an eye on the chat. You can tell me if that's the case, and if not, we'll wrap things up. So thanks again, Colin. And
you're welcome. Thank you.
It was very nice to have you, and I think that it was a really interesting conversation about computer science. So to all of our visitors, I hope that you found the evening, if you were with us from the beginning, interesting and informative. And we will have other events coming up during the year. So please keep an eye out for Taster Day and our next undergraduate open day. And news of all of those will be on social media, but you can also keep an eye on nuigalway.ie/CAO because we'll most likely have links there. You can follow at STEM NUI Galway. So look us up on Instagram or on Twitter as well. So we'll be getting more active on those and posting lots of information about our different courses. And we might see you at a further event. In the meantime, have a nice evening and good luck with everything else you do. Bye for now.
Bye, folks.
Thank you.